once again, a lot of ideas, and see if you can drop into feel your own experience, your own feet on the ground, your own breath, as we move into our next panel, which is on a woman's multicultural view of personality theory, and Dr. Zari Hedayat is here with us, and Marli Kakishima, and Julie Rodrigues. So please, if you could come here and make yourself comfortable.
I just wanted to thank Matt, because I'm very honored and excited to be here. I think this is a very significant day of change and shift in how we look at personality theory, and I'm very excited to be part of that. Just to give you a little bit of my background, I am an alumna of Antioch, graduated in 2009 as a MAP student, and I was initially part of the first integrative depth class for the shadow work, and that's actually, I think, what's brought me here is what was evoked in me in that class with that shadow work and my connection to certain questions I had in my personal experience. My work experience, I've worked within the private nonprofit sector for over 10 years in various roles. I work with children, youth, and families that are involved in the child welfare system and probation, and in kids that are in group home settings, also with a program called Wraparound, which is very community-based and oriented, and that's actually the program I'm involved with right now. As an intern, I am working in private practice. I work mainly with women, which has been a very, very interesting experience for me in my process and evolution. And the nonprofit it's a very small nonprofit in Student City, and my supervisors are union. So I am practicing under that lens there, and utilizing soundtrack with the adults I work with. And my other job, my main work with Wraparound, I'm a Wraparound clinician, and I work within the San Gabriel Valley, go a little bit into San Bernardino County too. And it's a program I'm very passionate about, and it's very community-based and centered. So that's a little bit about me and what I'm currently doing. So what brought me here today was this great interest in women-centered multicultural view of personality theory, and I think the need to bring visibility to this population, because I don't think it's traditionally been represented. And for me, on a personal level, I identify myself as a woman of color. I identify myself as Latina. And I wanted to share with you today the research I did in the integrative depth class, and a paper I wrote entitled Empowering the Latino Voice Through Spirità. And that was the work I did. It was based on the 2007 Carolyn Sheriff Award address entitled Spirità, Reclaiming Womanness Sacredness into Feminism by Dr. Lillian Comas-Diaz. And also there was another article entitled Illuminating the Black Madonna, A Healing Journey, also by Dr. Lillian Comas-Diaz. And really when I discovered her, I found my path. Her path was very similar to the path I was on. And it became very, very powerful in my growth process and process of individuation. I think that was the beginning for me. So I wanted to start off with a quote. It's from Grandmother Spider. Only those who forget why they came to this world will lose their way. So in discovering Dr. Comas-Diaz, it felt like for the first time I had a mentor that mirrored my experience. I began to feel validated, and my experience of feeling dark, that was something that kept arising for me, and I didn't understand it. So that's actually the connection when I did the research, connected me to Dr. Comas Diaz, and started bringing meaning to what that meant to me in my process. I realized that the other explanations that contributed to the development of self did not suit me. I didn't fit in that mold. And I discovered that there was a way I could be in the world that made sense and provided meaning to my experience as a woman of color and the challenges that with my identity and feelings of depression and not feeling as though I had a voice. So it's a very, very powerful beginning journey. So I just wanted to explain a little bit about what Spirita is. And actually, this is the first time I think I've really delved into this. This research I did was in 2009. And as life goes on, I sort of forgot about it. So in this, I'm revisiting what I did back then. So it's been an interesting process going back. So Spirita is a womanist and mujerista spirituality that is protest, resistance, re-evolution and evolution, promoting collective healing, international solidarity, and global social justice. In contrast to feminist mainstream spirituality, Spirita places the interaction of race and gender at the center of women's lives. A way of knowing and being, Spirita endorses a universal perspective. Spirita can enrich mainstream feminism by moving the subjective experience of women of color from the margins to the center of feminist thought, creating visibility. And I think for me, on a personal level, even within the field now, there is this feeling of not being visible. It's like we don't exist. So it is something that has drawn me to Spirita. The inspiration for the development of Spirita comes from liberation psychology, with influential roots stemming from leaders as Franz Fanon, Paulo Freire, and Ignacio Martin Barro, who cumulatively influenced Dr. Comas Diaz in her creation of Spirita. This viewpoint in psychology examines the effects of colonization as a discipline that emphasizes the effects of political, economic, and psychological domination. Gotta turn the page. Of both the oppressor, the colonizer, and the oppressed, the colonized. And the effects of colonization still linger among many women of color, and I think in particular Latinas. Colonization generates cognitive distortions. It changes the oppressed sense of trust, power, agency, and safety. Moreover, it gives birth to the colonized mentality or the emotional and psychological reactions such as alienation, self-denial, assimilation, and strong ambivalence. While women of color have been included in feminism, many believe this movement has not fully understood their needs. Womanists critically reflect the suffering of people and prefer to work with the oppressed. Likewise, they challenge social injustice and extend their solidarity to oppressed individuals all over the world. Womanists are committed to the full liberation of their communities as well as society at large. And I think this is where my attraction to working with Wraparound comes, because it is a community-based program that is very near and dear to my heart. So for dark women of color, a highly marginalized group, such internalization of colonization and oppression provides the formula for higher risk of symptoms of mental illness that manifest from unexpressed internalized pain, grief, and shame. And that's something that I was contending with on a personal level, was depression, and trying to figure out where this was coming from and making sense of it. Spirita reminds women of color why they came into this world. As a way of life, Spirita celebrates a love of spirit and reclaims sacredness in all. Thus, it helps women reconnect with themselves and others. It promotes the gestation of people who liberate themselves by liberating others. According to Spirita, Accordingly, Spiritha emphasizes service to others as a vehicle of spiritual development. And in this concept, it is learning to transmute the pain, the grief, and shame into strength, passion, and compassion. And part of my journey in doing this research, one of the iconic figures that came up for me was Our Lady of Guadalupe. And she was just a very strong image. Even most recently as well, she's come out in artwork that I've done. So she's an iconic figure representing the liberation warrior. And she's the patroness goddess of the Americas. And she's a blend of the Mexican goddess Tonantzin. She's a mother goddess or an earth goddess as well, the divine feminine. And then she's incorporated with the Virgin Mary. So she represents, iconically, freedom and liberation as a warrior that is celebrated by the Catholic Church. And it's very interesting because she knows her power even as a poor, dark peasant woman. And women in spirituality, transformation enables us to alchemize oppression into liberation. So it's interesting. I have a quote here from Our Lady of Guadalupe's words to Juan Diego. Do not fear any illness or vexation, anxiety or pain. Am I not here who am your mother? Are you not under my shadow or protection? Is there anything else you need? In my work in the community, as a therapist with wraparound, we, rather than have families come to an agency or an office, we go out to the community. We'll go out to neighborhoods. Some are more challenging neighborhoods than others. Some are poor neighborhoods, and we have gang affiliation and higher risks in certain neighborhoods. But I found in my experience it's been interesting when I go to the Latino neighborhoods that Our Lady of Guadalupe is very revered within the culture. And I can see murals on the wall, you see the graffiti and such, but she's revered and untouched. And I've worked with many single moms that are within the child welfare system, and I often see this iconic figure. She's in the home. There symbolically. So for me, going out into the field, having this personal experience, but also going out into the field, is very, very interesting in seeing her within the community. So Dr. Comas Diaz also talked about, she made a comparison between feminist spirituality versus Spiritha. So in feminist spirituality, it's more eclectic, where Spiritha is more integrated. Feminist spirituality is self-historical cultural, where Spiritha is cultural, transcultural analysis. Feminist spirituality is self-liberation, where Spiritha is collective liberation. Feminist spirituality is the goddess within, and Spiritha is sacredness. Feminist spirituality is sisterhood, whereas Spiritha is sibling and worldhood. Feminist spirituality encompasses self, community healing, and Spiritha is a universal healing. Feminist spirituality is Gaia-oriented. Spiritha looks at social justice. Feminist spirituality is cross-cultural, borrowing, and Spiritha is cultural acknowledgement and inclusion. Feminist spirituality is empathetic joy, and Spiritha is trauma-derived vicarious empathy. Feminist spirituality is personal development, where Spiritha looks at service. And feminist spirituality looks at the heroine's journey, and Spiritha looks at the womanist path. And so that's something that I've been drawn to. So how do personal theories impact women like us? I think historically someone like myself has not been represented in traditional personality theory. I've had to conform to the dominant culture of theory, which does not represent my unique experience as a woman or as a Latina. As a woman of color, are we acknowledged, visible? No, we have been historically invisible. which is of great concern as the population that I work with currently is out in the community. And then in the work I've done over the years with people of color, especially with girls and women. And the question that comes up for me is how can we understand and serve the population that is prevalent if we do not address the needs and multicultural experiences in the academic setting before we're placed out in the field. And oftentimes in my experience as an intern, I see that we're expected to pathologize and not take into consideration the multicultural and women-centered needs of our clients. And on a personal level, I'm very frustrated. This frustrates me too. In working with other interns and other agencies as well that do not serve the sensitivity to this multicultural lens and needs of people of color and women of color, and not having that awareness. So I think today we're planting the seeds of this awareness, which is something that's very exciting to me. And I think I'm holding the tension of the frustration with that, but I'm also very hopeful for the future. So my hope for today is that change is incited on a collective level, and that today we drop a pebble in the water, and that the ripples will begin to move outward and bringing much awareness with this topic. And I think today everyone here is an agent of change, and I think that's a very powerful thing. Thank you. Thank you.
Allow me to stand up because actually in preparing this segment of the women's multicultural segment, I actually got in touch with somatic experiences myself, and I could see that the shadow material is very somatic, so not very visual for me, but very somatic. So I think I will begin from my background as well, and I was excited to see some parallels between my polycultural background and indigenous background. Okay, so I have a Japanese side of me, and I will just let out some words that may be nothing meaningful for you, but for me it really strikes me like a thunderbolt. And it's really like a lightning bolt on my head and in my heart and in my body as well. Gaman, yasashi, shikkari shinasai. Okay, gaman is a type of patience, endurance to suffering, with patience and peacefulness. It's like you don't complain. You just hold it in and you just stand still and you smile. Yasashi is a type of kindness that is specifically in regards to women's kindness, which is characterized by acceptance, non-judgment, unconditional love. This is yasashi. And there is the shikkari shinasai. This is actually my father's samurai sword calling, in which he would say, basically, it's like straighten yourself up, but that somatically for me and for most of Japanese, I believe, is like, you know, the Buddhist, Zen Buddhist principle of the hara, hold my power in the hara, the belly. So that's actually what happens to me. It's like a shikkari shinasai. You straighten up and you hold your stomach and you just sit still and you don't complain. Anyway. Are just American for me. Anyway, and there is my other cultural background, which is somehow Latina also, but from Brazil. And myself as Brazilian is in touch with another part that is very instinctual, samba. Samba is not holding here or straighten up, is really actually doing movements on the waist, and the feet are in movement, right? It's very sensual. Another part of it is a physical touch. So in Brazil, I think that in Mexico or in other countries, you would actually greet others by kissing on the cheeks, regardless of whether of gender or sexual orientation. It doesn't matter. 2 kisses if you are married, 3 kisses if you are unmarried. And if you don't do that, you are cold. So the boundaries are much more different. And the instinct in nature, because Brazil, there is a kind of blending of cultures in Brazil that was very different from countries in South America, Central America that were colonized by the Spaniards. Actually, the Portuguese were blending more with the races of the land. And I think that there was more preservation of the indigenous cultures in a way that didn't happen in Mexico and in other countries in the Andes. So anyway, and there is my new American background somehow. So in Brazil, I was called the Japanese girl. In Japan, I was called the pretending to be Japanese woman. And here in the United States, I am myself somehow. But at the same time, everything cost a price for me to be in these different places. And I could find out who I am when I first left Brazil, my homeland. And I think that I can relate to several scholars, Japanese scholars that went to Europe to enter in contact with Freud face-to-face. So the first contact of Japanese with psychoanalysis was face-to-face with Freud, and they learned German. So they talked to Freud in Freud's home language, like a native language, and they could actually grasp that first concept, absorb, and actually, because Japan was insulated from the Western world until recently, they could actually develop their own psychoanalytical approach to Japanese culture. But anyway, like Julie's background of the Virgin Mary, there is actually a very same archetype in Brazil, which is actually is Virgin Mary of Aparecida, Nossa Senhora de Aparecida. She is black. She's African American. She's African Brazilian. She's African. She's a woman of color, and she used to show up in places of oppression where African slaves were being mistreated or tortured, and she would liberate them. And there are miracles